Good day, ladies and gentlemen. The Great War. The war to end all wars. World War I was one of the largest conflicts in human history. But as humans are wont to do, it was of course overshadowed by World War II, just 2 decades later. There have been numerous movies and books created to show the war to the public, but not altogether that many video games. It wasn't until Battlefield 1 that the general public even remembered that World War I even happened. Well, today, we're taking a look at a game that came out before Battlefield 1. Today, we are taking a look at NecroVision. NecroVision was developed by Polish developer The Farm 51 and released in 2009. The game is a classical styled FPS with health pack healing and the ability to carry all of your weapons on you at any one time. And unlike in Battlefield 1, you actually get historically accurate weaponry. No red dot equipped semi-auto rifles here. Your first rifle is the #1 Mark III Lee Enfield, and it does not have a scope or a red dot or a forward grip. You load it from properly modeled 5-round stripper clips. The rifle works well enough, and having 10 rounds is quite the boon. Then you have the Gewehr 98, and the bolt is properly modeled on the right side, and the longer vizier sight is more or less correct, if a bit more open than in real life. You can pick up a trench gun that is positively required in certain sections, even if said Winchester 1897 would not really be available in 1916, the year this game is set. Another weapon that is picked up is the MP-18, a submachine gun that wouldn't be available until 1918. We could say that this is an early prototype, or we could say that in this universe it was based off of a vampire weapon. Surprise! Alternate history. NecroVision is a game that is surprisingly historically accurate, but can indeed be called, like Wolfenstein, but World War I. In this version of World War I, Death's Head Sr., otherwise known as Zimmerman, has discovered a cache of high-tech equipment, and is thus trying to win World War I with it, and said equipment was created by an ancient race of vampires. And late game, you can pick up vampire weapons, aka emo guns, because they are black and angsty and play Linkin Park when you shoot them. Okay, I might have made that last bit up. You can indeed get a vampire submachine gun, so the MP-18 might have been invented a bit early due to Hugo Schmeiser getting his hands on a vamp SMG. You can get access to an MG0815, and like in Nosferatu, Wrath of Garth Marenghi, it is man-portable. And it would seem that the player character in this game has gotta be at the very least some sort of relative to Ethan Cole, because you can indeed dual-wield MG0815s. You do get an anti-tank weapon in the guise of rifle grenades. Sadly, you cannot dual-wield 2 tank und Flieger guns. The game does not use bloody arenas and is actually fairly open in its level design. Graphically, the game looks quite good even in 2018, and the lighting is excellent. The guns are graphically detailed and are correctly modeled. The enemies are nice and varied and range from the basic Imperial German Soldat to giant onion ogres. Music is basic, but serviceable, and the voice acting, well, the voice acting is pure B-movie cheese.
Uh-huh. Here comes the unwelcoming committee.
You know, it probably sounds like this is a great game. It probably sounds like it's going to be a fun and cheesy experience. Surprise! It's a crappy game. It's been some time since I have been this disappointed. This should be a game that I love, and a game that I wholeheartedly recommend. In reality, it's a game that is almost good. It is a mere 10 points from being good. But for all the good that the game brings, it brings a disproportionate amount of bad. First and foremost, the game is not fun in the slightest, and that is by far the most disappointing aspect. The weapons look cool, and the levels are not just endless corridors, and you have great enemy variety. Sadly, the weapons do very little damage, and the enemies come in massive numbers, so most of the time you are beating them off with melee, and possibly this guy is a relative of Duke Nukem, because his Mighty Boot is actually more powerful than a bloody Gewehr 98. The gunplay is very floaty. You never really know if you're going to actually hit an enemy, and even if you do hit one, that really doesn't matter because they take numerous hits to take down, and there's always going to be 10 more that rush and attack you. So sadly, most of the time, your guns are going to be somewhat useless. Remember way back in the day when I complained about the first-person camera scene in AVP3? Well, you know what? I found a game that actually has a worse first-person shooter camera. The first-person camera, as you can see, is utter scheisse, and half the time you're going to be asking yourself, where did I go just now? Hell, even when you're running around, the camera lurches about the screen like a half-Klingon monster. The floatiness of the gameplay is further compounded by the health system. You can pick up health kits, but it doesn't seem to matter, and you can tank numerous shots and never even come close to going down. I can only imagine that the game has some sort of hybrid health pack / regenerative health system, and the game has 3 difficulty settings. Easy, normal, and hard. Simple, right? Well, normal is easier than easy, and it's one of those bloody games where playing smart gets you killed more often than not. All of this contributes to massively unsatisfying gameplay that is more boring than inciting. I want to say it's a slog, but slogs are generally a bit tougher than this in terms of difficulty, so instead I will say it's a march through hip-deep tapioca pudding. But wait, it gets even better. If the gameplay was not bad enough, the game design is even worse. The levels are nice and huge, and you are not confined to 2-foot arenas. Sadly, the levels are primarily dark subdued colors with numerous decals. That is not necessarily a bad thing. However, when you're trying to find a bloody gray key in a bloody dark gray room, it becomes a bit of a problem. In this game, finding where to go is not an easy prospect. In some games like Fear, finding where to go is actually a fun thing. It actually enhances the gameplay. Here, finding where to go is really bloody annoying and brings the game to a screeching halt. Proper level design draws the player to important locations. In a properly designed level, you do not need arrows or compass points. The player themselves should be able to find where to go. In poorly designed levels, you never know where to go because nothing draws the eye, and you can spend hours going around in circles. The most egregious location is right here. You have this massive room. There is nothing in it. Nothing at all. Nothing to draw the eye. Nothing to give the player a bloody clue as to what to do. What you have to do is hit this easily missed switch that, quite frankly, looks like a piece of level architecture and not something you can actually interact with. And the whole game is littered with locations such as this that annoy the player rather than excite the player. So, you got bad gameplay and bad game design. Can the game get any worse? Well, you know that's rhetorical, because of course it's going to get worse. The game is very poorly programmed as well. Load times even on a modern machine take ages, and the game is buggy as all hell. I had some crashes to desktop, but what really made me completely unapologetic about the game was right here. Level 3. I was actually starting to have a little bit of fun. I was actually going to try and say that this was a good game, a bit unpolished, but still decent for $1. This is the GOG version of the game. It's fully patched and should, at the very least, work. It does not. Right here, you need to pick up an oil lamp. There are dozens of the bloody things. I could not pick up a single one. I ran around to each of the bloody things and mashed the E key. I even looked up a walkthrough thinking, oh, you have to pick up an exact oil lamp to progress. Bupkis. No lamp could be picked up. And lo did my NecroVision adventure end because I couldn't pick up a simple gas lamp. Thankfully, while this game was poorly programmed, it was still enough of a PC game to allow for good old-fashioned cheats. And thus, NVN Levels was put into the console, and I could continue the game. But by that point, I was feeling surly and far less than charitable. You know what's even worse? The story is tragically good. The story is the best aspect of the game. Too bad you can't enjoy it because the game sucks. In this game, you play as an American trooper fighting for the British Army. It's okay, folks, it's okay. He's Southern, and that makes it all the better. Well, for me at least. The tone of the story is actually pretty good and shows the horrors of World War I. Far better, in fact, than Battlefield 1 could ever hope to. Too bad the game sucks. The first part of the game has the Southern gentleman fighting through the trenches of the Somme, only to get caught in a gas attack. It's a fairly cool sequence, and then, surprise, trailer. In the game, you get knocked out, and then you see the game's trailer for some reason. And I know this is a trailer because during some segments you can see ammo counters. Why the developers chose to put this here, well, I actually have my suspicions. I think they wanted to pad the runtime out, so they just stuck it here. It is here that we see our main character, and he looks a lot like the old Ash Williams, and talks a lot like him too. The dialogue for the game is the stuff of acting legend, and the dialogue is something that you can only really get from middle market games like this. So after the player character watches the game's trailer, it's time to get to fighting. And for the first part of the game, you fight the Germans, and they act decently enough, although at times they get a little Nazi, and thus a bit historically inaccurate. But this is explained by them being corrupted by their commander Zimmerman, aka Death's Head Sr. As you would expect, Zimmerman is a boss, and instead of simply fighting him on foot, you get access to a killer can, and you have an epic-looking showdown. Yay. You know where this is going. Sadly, the Killer Can both looks and controls like Mechanic Kong after he sat on his ass for 6 months eating nothing but deep-fried bananas. What should be an epic sequence is boring and uninteresting. It looks cool here, but trust me, it does not play as good as it looks. Eventually, you face Dr. Dr. Zimmerman, and he has an 80-foot scorpion, and you get this bit of incongruous dialogue.
I'll destroy you first, then I'll destroy the men from my unit, and then the entire British and German armies.
First, how does Dr. Zimmerlovelace actually hear you talking? Second, does that mean that the French and Russian armies got this? Because he didn't mention them, and as of 1916, they were still around, so does that mean his giant mechanical scorpion is somehow vulnerable to shows? So you waddle around the battlefield, chipping away at Dr. Lovelace, and then defeat him. The next part of the game is even more disappointing. You fight beneath the earth in the dead cities of the Vampire. The gameplay is just as floaty and tedious, and the Vampire SMG literally tanks the goddamn frame rate. Honestly, with a story this interesting, I would rather read NecroVision the novel instead of playing the goddamn game. Also, surprise! Darkness ripoff. Inspiration. During this part of the game, you get the a magic glove that totally doesn't talk like the Darkness does. The voice from the glove sounds good, and the writing is decent. The glove gives you some okay attacks, like a fireball and a freeze ball, and you of course totally don't get painkiller-styled blades. The problem with the blades is the fact that the attacks really shake up the camera, and thus make figuring out what is going on even more difficult. And then we come to the part of the game that really pissed me off. Surprise! Giant mechanical dragon. The dragon's voice is cool, and the levels should be fun, but bad hit detection really puts a damper on the giant mechanical dragon level. Eventually, you learn that in addition to signing a pact with the foul Dreadlord Joe Quesada, Mephisto also wants to take over the world, cause, surprise, demons. Before you can take on Mephisto, you have to take down his generals, painkiller style. After more tedious battles, it's time to take him down. You would think that this would be an epic battle, right? Wrong. You hop in another obese Mechanic Kong and have a rock-off with the devil, and this fight is boring and tedious and goes on way too long. Surprise! The game punishes you if you play on higher difficulties. Easy is the good ending, normal is the kinda bad ending, and hard, well, it's the worst ending of them all. The end. During live streams, people love to ask me what is my most disappointing game. Well, that used to be Colonial Marines. Now, it is sadly NecroVision. everything that could go wrong in the game did. The gameplay is utter tedium, the levels are utter tedium, and the game literally punishes you for playing on harder difficulties. This game has everything right in concept, but utterly fails in its execution. There is a good game buried under all this scheisse, and if this game had a dedicated modding team, it wouldn't really take that much tweaking to fix. All you gotta do is tighten up that shooting. Have compass points or glowing keys and switches to compensate for the overly large, poorly designed levels, and most importantly, reduce some of the boss health so that the battles are way less tedious. Sadly, this is a game that I cannot recommend in any way, shape, or form. Sure, it looks good in theory, but in practice, all it does is disappoint you and make you wish to Talos that it actually had been competently executed. And so, I am Generallotz, wishing you good Battlefield 1 and good prey, or whatever makes you happy. If you enjoyed my review of the craptacular NecroVision, please consider subscribing, and if you can, please consider supporting me on Patreon so that I can continue bringing you these game reviews.